I believe that this incursion into what I would call Mikhail Tal's strategic universe would not be complete if we would not try proving what I would call the universality of his strategic thinking. Some of the elements we've seen so far have their correspondence either in more recent games of players from other generations, strong players, world champions, and also other ones have the roots into very old games from the beginning of the 20th century. So it's not that Tal invented something that could not be repeated. He either used the previous experience or created something that could be used after him. So let's take, for instance, the way he took advantage of the weakness of the e6 pawn in his 11th game from the match with Botvinnik. And let's compare it with this other game played by Kasparov, a world champion that came many in the succession of world champions. There are many champions separating Tal and Kasparov. But still, he was just as effective in not only in exploiting this weakness, but also it was obvious that he was playing for this kind of structure. But it's better developed, and a developing advantage is best kept by continuing the development. So bishop g5 looks like a natural move, and rook d1. And now Black is invited to prove a way to complete his own development. Bishop g4 is a possibility, but after f3, bishop h5, White somehow gets free hands in the center, and Hübner probably did not like that. So he preferred the modest bishop e6. Of course, he saw that in this position, his e6 pawn is very weak. He doesn't really lose it because taking it would allow probably queen d4 with some counterplay. But Kasparov is not interested to take the pawn at once. The pawn is there, and probably Hübner thought that the weakness of the d4 square and also the weakness induced by the move a2 a3 may compensate for this for his own strategic problem. Also, the knight seems to be stable on f6, so maybe if Black manages to play queen d7, rook e8, rook e8, e5, well, there would be this square here, but okay, it would be much worse if White had a knight and Black had a bishop, and then he would install the knight on e4. But like this, maybe he thought, well, this is defensible. And here we can see that Black's situation is slightly better than in Tal's game, because the move g6 is not on the board, so the plan h4, h5 is not dangerous, and the knight is more stable. But then Kasparov designed a very interesting plan. It looks that he weakens this square a little bit, but the problem is that the knight has no access to it. And this plan h3, g4, which is to a certain extent similar to Tal's h4, h5, it is not an attacking plan. It's a strategic attack, actually. Now Black has to live with the permanent idea that his knight is not so stable on f6. And then this causes him permanent problems. He has to count with the move g4, g5 on every step. And it's quite unpleasant to live with a Damocles sword above your head. And actually, the game lasted for just for less than 10 more moves before Kasparov won. And there is another game from Kasparov's career that is quite similar against Karpov. It's interesting that in this position, after knight takes e6, Karpov, I don't know, he didn't know the game Kasparov-Hübner, or maybe Tal's game. or what did he have in mind when he played f takes e6? I mean, knight takes e6 does not lose. White is slightly more active, should be better, but why would he play this? He probably underestimated the problems in the long term, and he also got punished by Kasparov. These two games, they don't only have in common the structure somehow, black structure, because white has no Isolani on d4. That's the difference. But we can also see that the material balance is the same, not from the middle game of the game, Tal-Botvinnik, but after what Tal considered to be the decisive mistake, meaning queen d6, allowing the exchange of one rook. So it's the same material balance. So it's not only that the structure was proved to be bad for black by Tal, it's also the judgment that with only one rook left on board, or on each side, the position is hard to defend for black. Let's move further now. You remember the wonderful knight, the wonderful c5 knight in the games against Gomez, which at some point Tal impatiently took to g5 and almost lost the pawn because of it. Okay, such a knight, although the opponent was a Slav, such a knight was known to be very strong from several classic games in the Fianchetto King's Indian, and one of the most famous is a game that Botvinnik lost with white. Botvinnik was a natural enemy of the King's Indian. He had to face it against Tal and some other historic opponents. So he had worked out the G-series system very well. And this was one common tabia. It was actually rehearsed also in Zurich 53. You can find several good examples in Bronstein's book, tournament book. So in this tabia, obviously white has an advantage on the king side. He can prepare some attack, f4, g4, but then the position is a little bit shaky on the queen side. Queen b4 is a permanent threat, and the c4 pawn is not so easy to defend. And Botvinnik decided to play a3, which is a self-blocking move, as Geller called it. He relied on the fact that, okay, his attack would be strong, and the strategic problems from the queen side would not be important. But the way the game went was that white was just attacking, and the stability of the knight on c5 somehow kept trouble away from black. Somehow pieces got exchanged on the king's side in the center, and little by little the knight on c5 became increasingly popular, increasingly important. So we can see that the second knight arrives to support the c5 knight. So actually, I believe this is the game that made Botvinnik make his famous statement that we never really understood the King's Indian until Geller. Because somehow he probably saw that the initiative on the king's side would be the most important factor, but then Geller proved that the black position is very resilient, precisely because the stability of the knight on c5. Well, Tal got a much better version in his game against Gomez, because white had no advantage at all on the king's side. But the concept itself of the knight on c5, blocking knight, is simply great. And now I have mentioned at some point that Rubinstein was a player who was supposed to have these long plans, and there are several games which can be described this way. I mean, just making a plan and then winning the game according to it. And Well, the game I'm showing here has several elements in common with Tal Timan. There is this bishop exchange, which will take place on another diagonal, not on f4, d6. But Black played queen a5, thinking that the simplification, that the exchange of queens would bring in some relief. But actually, it's not like this, because after these exchanges, the king is active. Okay, the situation in the center is slightly different. Black has no weaknesses on one hand, but then white has an advantage, two pawns. At the same time, Black can organize his counterplay on the queen side by advancing his majority. So there are several elements which make the position quite different if compared with Tal Timan. But at the same time, if we look at the position, for instance, here, it's obvious that the central king is one important element. And it's also instructive to see that the final part of the game, at some point, he started his attack with g4. Actually, the main idea was to keep activating the king. I mean, the pawn advance simply cleared some squares, and little by little the king would clear his way not to the center, but this time to the king side. We can see that Black somehow managed to simplify the position, but now the king finally advances. I mean, so far the trajectory is the same as in the Tal game, Tal Timan. Only that in that game, Tal went in this direction, and now in this game he'll go. Let's make it another color. He'll go here, meaning that the Black king will soon be mated. So this general offensive, white keeps increasing his space advantage and clearing space for the king, creates this impression of one plan, one game, one plan. So even though Rubinstein and Tal are quite different as players, I think there are central elements that certain games of them have in common. So that was my short thesis about the universality of Tal's strategic thinking. Thank you.